So Russia's nuclear rhetoric and messaging is reckless and dangerous, and Russia must know that a nuclear war can not be won and must never be fought. And we are, of course, closely monitoring what Russia is doing.
This man is Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, better known as NATO. Almost 2 years into the conflict in Ukraine, his words allow us to understand two things. On the one hand, the concern generated by the possibility of Russia deciding to launch a nuclear attack. And on the other hand, the certainty that such an act would provoke a devastating war in which none of the parties involved could claim victory, as the losses would be enormous for each side. However, Moscow refuses to back down and points fingers at the United States, as the Western country has supported Kyiv during the Russian invasion. All of this leaves the door open to a global escalation of the conflict. In this new video, we will analyze a possible scenario in which the Third World War breaks out, and we will discover who could intervene to defeat Russia and its allies. Join us in imagining a catastrophe from which no one would be safe.
Папа будет продавать что-то, будет помогать нашим героям, нашим войскам будет помогать, может даже будет воевать.
To begin, we must know that some military experts and experienced veterans in the field assert that the war has ceased to be exclusive between Russia and Ukraine. On the contrary, they warn that although the combat remained within the boundaries of the invaded country in February 2022, it must be recognized as a global conflict due to the direct or indirect involvement of many other nations. Undoubtedly, the most relevant is that of the United States, which has sent billions in military equipment to Kiev to carry out a counteroffensive against Russian forces. That was what motivated Moscow to launch repeated threats against Washington, mostly through President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin leader has shown that he does not hesitate when it comes to facing a war, something that leads us to believe that the escalation of aggressions is real. That said, Russia is aware that it would be facing the greatest military power on the planet, which is capable of surpassing it in both resources and investment, as well as in quantity and quality of weaponry. That's why it's time to imagine what the Kremlin's best move would be to keep its chances of victory alive. So we ask ourselves, what if this hypothetical world war against the US adds other actors from the Russian side? USA knows that one-on-one, he has the odds on his side for victory, but his interests worldwide have earned him quite a few powerful enemies. A global conflict would allow Russia to add the third great power to its side, an emerging China that has approached the best armies in recent decades through new developments and advanced military technology. Furthermore, another country that wouldn't miss the opportunity to ally itself with a powerful coalition to confront the United States is North Korea. While it may not contribute the same volume as the other two members of its team, it knows it has enough to inflict damage and tip the balance. Would you dare to bet on a winner at this moment? Before doing so, let's learn a little more about the power of each side. If we refer to an alliance between Russia, China, and North Korea, we are talking about the American nightmare. They are all on the list of concerns of the U.S. Department of Defense, and there is a clear explanation as to why. A coalition made up of these countries represents an investment that, in 2023, was over $377 billion when summing the three. Additionally, their combined forces can muster over 4 million soldiers ready to fight. These are truly formidable figures for any rival, although on the other side we don't have just any enemy. Regarding personnel, the United States has 190,000 troops, much fewer than the total of its adversaries. However, it can surpass the enemy's military budget alone, with defense spending of around $800 billion in 2023. This implies that the Americans may be fewer in number, but they have greater resources to ensure that these forces are well prepared. At this point, we need to delve into what weaponry and technology could be obtained with these investments and how this would influence a battle. Our first stop takes us to the air forces of the Eurasian Coalition, where among the three nations, they accumulate a total of almost 8,300 aircraft, of which 2,430 belong to the category of combat planes. The most significant contribution from North Korea in this item is a Soviet-origin fighter jet. We're talking about the MiG-29, a fourth-generation aircraft designed for air superiority, with a speed of Mach 2 and great maneuverability to make a difference in close combat. Nevertheless, in this category, the most outstanding jets come from Russia and China. Both have advanced fifth-generation developments. In the case of Moscow, it's the Sukhoi Su-57, a multi-role fighter distinguished by its avionics and stealth capabilities. Additionally, it has a dozen hardpoints for weaponry, great speed, and greater range than its competitors. On the other hand, the notable Chinese one is the Chengdu J-20, a versatile twin-engine aircraft with stealth capabilities. Thus, a trident is formed that can overwhelm any fleet. However, on the other side lies the most powerful air force on the planet. The United States boasts nearly 2,000 combat aircraft, including the two most advanced fifth-generation fighters in the world, the F-22 and the F-35. Just by seeing these images, you can imagine their enormous potential. These jets have greater maturity in terms of stealth capabilities, potentially allowing them to outmatch their rivals. However, the number of these two alternatives in the American inventory is low when compared to the combined total of the three opponents we analyzed. For that reason, it's difficult to think of a clear advantage for Washington, and even the odds might favor the other side. Let's turn to the oceans to discover the naval might of the alliance. Two aircraft carriers provided by China join the lone Russian carrier for a total of 3. Then the count becomes substantial in terms of quantity and variety of submarines, totaling 183 among the three forces. This is further complemented by 65 destroyers, 55 frigates, and 162 corvettes as attack vessels. Here, China stands out the most in terms of numbers and technology, with developments such as their modern stealth missile-launching Type 055 destroyers, or the silent Yuan-class submarines, difficult to detect by any rival vessel. Nevertheless, once again, the United States has the material to stand firm in this hypothetical battle, starting with its 11 supercarriers. It's not just the largest fleet on the planet, but also the most advanced. Additionally, it adds over 70 destroyers and a similar number of submarines, including its nuclear fleet. However, once again, qualitative advantage is not sufficient to offset the numerical inferiority compared to its adversaries. Lastly, let's analyze the most powerful armaments in each faction's ranks, which brings us to the lethal armored vehicles. The Eastern Coalition shines with an impressive number of tanks, exceeding 24,000. While a good portion of them belongs to the Soviet era and possibly may not match the most modern ones, there are also some state-of-the-art gems. The Kremlin presents its new 55-ton T-14 Armata equipped with a smoothbore 125mm cannon. It also adds some of the most advanced defensive systems in the world. On the North Korean side, they contribute their M2020, about which little is known, but they bear a resemblance to the Armata, and it is assumed their protection is equally modern. Lastly, China adds its Type 99 equipped with a 125mm cannon and an automatic loader, a complete armored force and one of the most powerful that can exist. Just look with your own eyes at how fearsome it appears. Meanwhile, Washington defends itself in this field with a legend like the M1 Abrams, one of the most renowned tanks globally, which has played a significant role in several modern conflicts like the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. However, at this point, it's probably the one that marks the greatest difference in favor of the Eurasians. Decidedly, we could say that the United States couldn't overcome them. In fact, distance would be another factor in favor of the rival alliance, since they could dominate the region before American power arrives on the conflict scene. Hence, it's time to identify who could be the allies of the American forces to overcome the obstacles posed by their rivals, as when discussing a Third World War, we can't leave anyone out. As we start our video, we could see a representative of NATO addressing the threats from Russia, and it is believed that if Americans engage in such a war, they will have the support of their European allies. In that way, other military powers like France, Great Britain, or Germany would be the first to arrive by land with powerful Leopard 2 or Challenger tanks. They would be capable of controlling the situation and contributing aircraft like the advanced Rafale or Typhoon fighters while awaiting the arrival of American stealth bombers. The NATO members would provide the necessary support for the world's greatest military power to finally emerge victorious in this duel. However, Russia wouldn't leave without putting up one final fight. If Moscow feels cornered, Vladimir Putin wouldn't hesitate to use his more than 5,000 nuclear warheads before being defeated. It's likely that Russia would opt to begin by launching a tactical or low-yield nuclear weapon as a warning, and what follows would depend on the response from the United States. If the Pentagon keeps a cool head, it could seek dialogue to reach agreements and end the war. But if it responds, the exchange could be devastating. The Russians have formidable missiles like the R-28 Sarmat, a giant 36-meter, 210-ton weapon that can travel 18,000 kilometers and yield 60 megatons of power. This means that a single projectile can destroy everything in its path within a radius of 700,000 square kilometers. So with a dozen of them, they could wipe the entire US territory off the map. However, the Americans are not far behind. With an arsenal of 5,000 nuclear warheads, they can arm the Trident II D5. These rockets can reach targets 12,000 kilometers away and are launched from Navy submarines, making them difficult to detect by their enemies. Each missile can carry a 3.8 megaton payload, and a single ship can carry 14 of them. Thus, an attack by a US submarine could mean 91 megatons of power, wiping out an entire country. At this point, there is no doubt that a nuclear war would be the end of the world as we know it. Setting this aside, we can conclude that Russia would have strong support if it decides to start a global conflict, and not even the United States would be able to stop that alliance by itself. But everything would change if the Americans have the resources of NATO. In that case, they would become an invincible force and would achieve victory without hesitation. Now it's time to bid farewell, but before we do, we'd like to know what you thought of our analysis and hear your opinion. Who do you think would win a Third World War? Thank you very much for joining us. We invite you to stay tuned to our channel so we can meet again in the next video.